Hello, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. I'm Alex Guest. I lead the partnership team here at FullContact. I'm going to be jumping in a little bit later in the presentation, but wanted to take the time to introduce everyone, set the stage for what we'll be talking about today, and ultimately be the MC here for the webinar. We'll be talking about customer data platforms. This was a term that was coined by our first speaker, David Raab. He is the founder of the Customer Data Platform Institute. After he gets through his section, I'll jump in and I will be reviewing different data enrichment options out there in the ecosystem today and the impact that that data has on both your sales and marketing efforts. Finally, Nic Zangre, the VP of Product at Calibermind, will finish up the presentation portion of the webinar with best practices on leveraging data that you find within your CDP and set you up for success across the different revenue generating portions of your organization. After that, we'll close with 10 to 15 minutes of a live Q&A. So take notes, specifically if you have a question for one of the panelists, feel free to include that with your question and then chat in there towards the end. To give you some insight into what we'll be covering today, I wanted to present a couple of key learnings. Ultimately, we will be covering what a CDP is and why it's needed, why you should care about data integrity across your entire business, and how to achieve some more data cleanliness and accuracy. We'll be reviewing the key benefits of data enrichment across both sales and marketing teams. We want to talk about what makes a difference between a B2B and a B2C customer data platform. We'll also be reviewing how to implement 3 popular strategies or plays within your CDP. And then finally, the impact of both a customer data platform and enrichment on your bottom line. So I'll go ahead and pass this off over to David. Take it away.
Thank you, Alex, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. So I am David Raab, founder of the CDP Institute. And let's start with the basics. What is the CDP thing? Many of you have no doubt heard the term. I'll bet most of you can at least spell it, but most people still haven't quite gotten what a CDP is. So let's just talk a tad about the definition, which is that the CDP is a marketer-controlled system that builds a unified, persistent customer database that is open to other systems. So what does that mean? Marketer-controlled means what it sounds like, but it really means it's packaged software. This is not a custom job that your IT department has to build for you like a data warehouse. This is something you can go out and buy, and there's still some technical work involved, and honestly, the marketing department might not run it. Usually the vendor will run it for the marketer, or even the IT department will run it for them, but it's configured. It's not custom built. Unified persistent customer database is something that takes a bit of unpacking as a term. Let's just talk about unified first. Unified means that the customer data is brought together. So all data about a given customer is assembled into a single profile. So you get the much desired complete customer view, the 360-degree view, or single customer view that we all talk about and perhaps dream about at night, some of us. It's important to do that, obviously, because you can't do anything with the customer effectively unless you really have a complete view of everything the customer's done, at least everything you know about the customer, and recognizing that there are things you don't know. Persistent, again, just what it sounds like, means the data is stored someplace. It's not just shuttled back and forth from one system to another as part of a process flow. It's actually kept in a separate database, which means you can do things like look at trends and look at history and look at information that might actually vanish from your operational systems if you didn't store it someplace. A lot of systems, for example, don't keep an old address if a customer changes their address. Well, you as a marketer really want to know about the old address and the new address because chances are people's behavior changed when they moved. So you need that persistence because you don't necessarily have any other place to put that data. And then open to other systems means that not only does the CDP build this database and assemble it and often use it for its own purposes, like orchestration or predictive modeling or attribution or whatever analytics, it shares the data with other systems. It went to progressive kindergarten where it learned about sharing very young, and it took that lesson home, and I guess all the developers did too. So the data is shared with other systems, which means that the database is as valuable as it possibly can be. You get the most value out of assembling that data because the other systems can use it, which saves them from having to create their own data instead. So that's CDPs in general. Let's now look at why B2B CDPs in particular are needed, because CDPs initially were more used in the business to consumer world. But now we are seeing a number of B2B CDPs showing up. Part of the reason, similar to the reasons that are driving in B2C marketing, has gotten more complicated. I don't need to tell anybody that. The average mid-market company uses 23 marketing tools, according to Mary Meeker, and the enterprise north of 100. And I think most of you out there probably are living that at the moment. A lot of tools, producing a lot of data. CRM, your CRM system, which might be one logical place to put the data, one might think, actually has a lot of issues with data. Typically, the data in CRM is less than perfect because the salespeople who run it put the data in for their own purposes, and they know if Alex changed jobs, and they don't really necessarily have to bother to update the system. But of course, your systems don't know that Alex changed jobs, so you pay the price if you use that data that a salesperson doesn't necessarily pay. Similarly, marketing automation, another logical place to put all your customer data to build that complete customer view. Well, marketing automation systems were built for fairly specific purposes, essentially email nurture campaigns, maybe a little bit of lead scoring. They mostly work with data that either sync from the CRM system or that is generated directly through their own transactions. They're not really designed to aggregate data from a whole bunch of other sources, and they for sure don't have the capabilities to do the complicated matching that's needed to take B2B data and assemble a complete customer view with data from all different sources. So they just weren't built for it. So that kind of leaves us with the CDP. We need some system that's not CRM, that's not marketing automation, that's going to unify our data and then make it available. And that's marketer run, and well, by golly, that's the definition of a CDP, isn't it? So just this very pretty graphic here to make the point that data changes frequently. Data quality is really a critical issue. Sales reps waste a great deal of time if they're dealing with bad data. Marketers waste a great deal of time. Their analytics are wrong. They make poor decisions. They can't target properly. Lots of reasons that bad data is a problem, and lots of reasons that data goes bad, such as 20% of postal addresses changing and 60% of people having some sort of a change on their job title or employer or whatever over the course of a year. So B2B data, again, notoriously difficult to clean, so you need a CDP to really help with that. And let's look at special things you want to look at or look for in a B2B CDP. As I say, a lot of CDPs were built for B2C marketing. When B2B marketers have their own issues, they have to attach leads to accounts, which again is something the CRM system doesn't necessarily do very well, and a marketing automation system often doesn't even begin to try to do. They have to attach leads to opportunities, usually via accounts, so you can do your revenue attribution. They have to deduplicate company level information, which again may sound easy but isn't. They have to do attribution, revenue attribution at the account level, which is where that lead to account to opportunity matching comes in. You need to look for integration with CRM and with marketing systems, pre-built integration, which is very common in the systems that are designed as CDPs for B2B, not necessarily so common in systems that weren't designed for that. And you want to have APIs that let you connect the systems where you don't have a pre-built integration where you can use that. So those are some of the very quick tour of things you might want to look at in a B2B CDP. So now let's hand it back over to Alex.
Hey, thanks, David. I know I introduced myself earlier, but I wanted to dive in a little deeper. This is me from a data perspective. This is how I exist at FullContact. It's the information that you'll find on me within CRM systems out in the environment, and ultimately the data that exists within different B2B CDPs out there that are trying to engage me through my own professional channels. So you get additional information about who I am as a business professional, but you can also glean insights about where to communicate with me. It's no longer just my business phone number. It's no longer just my business email address. You also have the opportunity to engage with me across social networks like Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Reddit. I have my own personas on all of these channels. And if you can glean more insights about who I am as an individual, it's another opportunity to connect with me. I have an ingrained interest within our space: technology, startups, sales, marketing automation. And if you're reaching out to me and you start to feed into who I am as a human and not just a business professional, it's going to gain my attention. If you reference the brands that I engage with, the interests that I have, articles or books that I might have read in the past, it's a great opportunity to connect with me. So as the market evolves, like David was discussing, it's a new opportunity to learn more about me as an individual and leverage that data across your CDP, even if you're trying to reach out to me to set us up with a new service here at FullContact. Ultimately, the results that you're going to see through your sales and marketing efforts are going to be based in the quality of the data that you put within your CRM and take action on through your CDP. Cleanliness, accuracy, and enrichment play a big part in that. From a marketing perspective, the campaigns that you build need to be based on up-to-date information. Like David said, if I changed roles or switched my address, whether professionally or personally, that's an insight that you want to track, and you want to minimize the investment that you're pouring into outreach that's never going to go anywhere. If I change my email, if I'm no longer at that company, you don't want to build a strategy around poor data. From an email perspective, your first line of defense there is really email deliverability, and we'll jump into that here in a second. But from a sales end, once marketing or once your cold outreach gains the attention of your prospects, you need accurate information to direct your efforts to the right people, so you're going to generate revenue for your company. Your reps are going to spend less time reaching out to leads that will take a long time to convert or may never convert, and you can help accelerate their pipelines through targeted efforts. Ultimately, at FullContact, we view data enrichment as 3 distinct steps. First, there's data quality and validation. You need to make sure that the information that's coming in is something that you want to take action on. Next, you need to enrich that data. You want the most up-to-date information. You need to fill in gaps. You need to find that 360-degree customer view that David was mentioning for you to really be able to segment your prospects and your customers appropriately, sending them content communications that they find valuable, that they'll actually engage with, and then also to start to personalize those messages. A lot of email marketers out there today are using simple substitution tags to put in first, last name, title, things like that. But you can really start to dig in a lot deeper and start to include things about my role, the brands that I engage, the interests that I have, so your communications catch my attention. And then finally, there's taking action on that data. It requires a lot of time and attention. Ultimately, you need people at your organization that can dig through quality data to help sales and marketing engage the right audience at the right time and in the right place. As I'd mentioned, we've moved on from a world where you have 2 options to connect with your prospects, email and phone. There are now dozens, if not hundreds, of different social data platforms out there that you can get my attention and you can kick up a conversation with me. So going back to that first step around verification and validation, you really need to start to take a look at your emails. How are they coming in? Are you taking a look at whether or not it's even deliverable, or if that email is bringing risk into your organization? There are a bunch of different options up funnel from email verification where you can start to control this. Double opt-in is a popular tactic. That's when one of your prospects fills out a lead form, signs up for a webinar, downloads a white paper, and gives you their information. Some of the most savvy people out there are enriching that data and validating it in process, but if you don't have that today, double opt-in is going to send an email out to that person, and they need to confirm the delivery of that email before the data enters your CRM and then eventually your CDP. MailChimp actually changed their best practices this week on not requiring double opt-in and saying that single opt-in is enough. It's definitely a great way to put data into your systems, but if it's not valid and you're never going to reach that person, it could just be taking up your time. Once you have that valid and verified information, you start seeing an increase in your response rates just purely by the fact that you've changed your denominator. Sure, it might be fewer emails, but at least you know there are actual human beings behind those emails. Bounce rates can impact your deliverability, so your ability to get into inboxes in the future. So if you're not sending to bad email addresses, you'll continue to have a good reputation, and you will be able to optimize your strategies from there. And then finally, fewer spam complaints. Making sure you're sending it to the right person because it's a valid email and it's actually the person you were looking to target. If they're marking you as spam, that's also going to impact whether or not those emails are delivered in the first place. And validating that data up front can help you with that. So take a look at a quick email verification example. When Sarah's email comes in and you bounce it off an email verification tool, you're immediately going to be able to see whether or not that email is deliverable. Another thing that you need to keep an eye out for here, some email servers are set up to confirm any email. It's called a catch-all. That is going to confirm that you could send an email there, but it doesn't guarantee that it's going to hit the inbox. So keep an eye out for those. Also, there's the honeypots, as we like to call them, or people that are trying to catch you in violating CAN spam or CASTLE compliances, and that can have an actual financial impact on your company. We'll jump into that here in a second, but there are also some great email verification tools out there in the world that can correct emails if somebody just fat fingers their domain. So as you can see here with Sarah's personal email address, she meant to put in Gmail, but some of the more savvy tools out there can actually correct these emails on the fly, so you're only receiving accurate information into your CRM in the first place. Touching quickly on deliverability and compliance, I don't want to bore you guys. You're eating your lunch, you're probably getting excited for lunch, you don't want to hear about a lot of laws and complexities, but ultimately there are a few things that you want to consider. First is whether or not your system is set up on a dedicated or a shared IP. Dedicated is something that you solely own. You're responsible for establishing that reputation in the first place, or warming up the IP as it's called, which takes time, and it needs to be a concerted effort where you're pushing good data through your email channels. And then a shared IP is most likely an IP that's already been established. There's a group of individuals who are practicing email in a responsible way, so you all share the benefits of that. However, if you have a couple of bad eggs within a shared IP, it could cause problems to your deliverability rates, even if you're doing everything that you should be. Overall, you want to make sure you're abiding by best practices when you're sending out email. Clean up your lists, make sure they're good emails. If somebody's not engaging with your content over 3 to 6 months, you might want to explore taking a break on that person. Maybe you try to re-engage them through another channel before you start sending out email again. because the impact can be pretty severe. The US version of email laws is called CAN-SPAM. The penalties are steep. It can be up to $40,000 or so per violation. And those violations are things like misleading headers, deceptive subject lines, things that you're including free or win, a free trip. Those can have an impact on your deliverability and set you up for fines. You want to make sure that you have your physical address associated with your IP, you have an opt-out option, and ultimately you're responsible for any third-party senders. So if you allow an agency or another company to send emails on your behalf, if they violate these rules, you can actually be fined for that. CASL's the Canadian version. In my opinion, it's much more strict. And back in July, there were some changes to the law based off of a timeline that they had established when this went into effect. Now, private organizations have a right to take action if you violate these rules and regulations. So I would absolutely recommend taking a look at your email program, see if you're sending email to or from Canada, and make sure you're abiding by those guidelines. And then finally, GDPR is on the horizon. If you haven't heard of this, it's an EU regulation, not around email, but actually around data itself. Any company that operates within the EU, or any company really in the world that works with data, is subject to these laws. It goes into effect May of 2018, and there are ways to make sure you fall within the adequacy of those guidelines. Take a quick look at GDPR. If you hold data today, you want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. FullContact views itself as a human-to-human company. So when we're reaching out to our B2B prospects, we're making sure that we understand that person on an individual level. So we want to know everything we can know about that person. We want to know information about their B2B world, but then also who they are when they're at home. What are their favorite sports teams? Where do they like to travel? Do they have a family? All of this information really helps us cater our marketing and sales messaging to gain their attention and really have just a personal conversation with these prospects. So it's not just this dry professional conversation. We then start taking a look at things at a company level. There are a ton of different enrichment options out there at a company level. Ultimately, you want to know about the companies that you've had success with today. So enrich your CRM, take a look at who your top customers are, and try to go find them. Firmographics are going to be the things like what that company does, how many employees they have, what's their revenue. That'll help you target your efforts moving forward. There are great firms out there in the ecosystem that give you technographics or what tools they're using. Not only does this give you a better idea of who you're competing against, but also how you might engage that person. Here at FullContact, we use a marketing automation system called Autopilot. If you know about Autopilot and you can tell me how your data, your product can do great things through Autopilot, I'm more likely to listen as opposed to just a broad spectrum, hey, do you guys use marketing automation? And then we're also progressing into this world where there's not a whole lot of anonymity anymore. Nic's going to talk about this more, but there are enrichment tools out there now that can de-anonymize traffic, at least at a company level. If FullContact visits Calibermind's website, Calibermind can see that FullContact's taking a look at them. That might be a good opportunity for sales team to start to prospect into that organization. And then as soon as you convert leads, you now start to see the individuals behind those initial queries. So overall, just kind of summing up my section here, data's everywhere. Everybody's becoming data-driven because everybody has to. 10 years ago, revenue marketing didn't really exist, but now it's the gold standard for marketing. You need to have attribution. You need to be able to show ROI on the dollars that you're putting out there. We're seeing lower spends on impression marketing with big brands that they're vacating traditional media. They want to go somewhere that they can track every dollar. And that depends on good data and connected data to tie it back. Ultimately, there's a ton of benefits to data, but being able to save money on potential fines and compliance, the downstream costs of fixing a problem versus spending a little money up front to take care of the issue before it starts, giving your customers a better user experience, and then generating more revenue. Whether it is going after the right leads for the first time or saving the time of your sales team, data is going to help you get there. And then you also want to make sure that you have a good strategy in place across your organization. Everybody has to buy in on this. Marketing, sales. If you're not talking about this and you don't have defined rules, both hands might not be talking to one another. You're going to drop the ball and you could potentially get yourself into trouble. So with that, I'll pass it over to Nic.
So yeah, I thought the best way to kick off this session would be to introduce myself and talk a little bit about the day-to-day of some of my previous roles before joining Calibermind. So, you know, I've held leadership roles in consulting and demand gen and marketing ops. You know, and having those roles, you're always wondering revenue, how are my campaigns performing? You're a budget holder. You're thinking about how are my investments doing? Am I getting ROI on each of these investments? And then going back in my career earlier, you know, I've had campaign administrator roles where I'm building smart lists in Marketo and segmenting data. You know, this customer announcement needs to go out tomorrow at 12 p.m. So all hands on deck, we're building this customer announcement. So these are day-to-day projects from a campaign administrator. And then I've even had data janitor roles. Sometimes as a leader, I've had to dive into these systems and clean data if we didn't have budget or we were on a deadline. So, you know, I've spent many late nights working in Excel and working with offshore data teams. And I think this all came to a head prior to joining Calibermind. I was director of marketing ops at a large digital marketing company. So give you a little idea of our system landscape and architecture. We had 5 different email vendors that delivered emails in our system. We had 2 different chat vendors. We had Tableau, we had Marketo, Salesforce. All in all, I think there are about 60 to 65 tools in our stack. And as the tool owner, you know, I had charter over about 20 of these tools, and dealing with these data, moving it between the systems and really delivering the business impact to hit my objectives, you know, was blocked by access to this data, access to systems, expertise on the team to build these types of integrations. So you could say that kind of, you know, pushed me over the edge and lead me to Calibermind. So we're the first B2B purpose-built customer data platform, VC backed, and we're based in Boulder. So yeah, a couple bullets here on what makes a B2B CDP different, and then we'll dive into more of some of the strategy when implementing and using this data. So just a few more thoughts on this slide. B2B is different for, I guess, 5 main reasons I would break it down into. So one is there's unique business models. You may have a freemium business model. You may have reseller partners. You may have B2B to C business model. There's second and third party data sharing models at many B2B companies. So all of this adds complexity, adds systems, adds integration points, and makes data integrity even more important. At B2B companies, there's also longer sales cycles. So some of our customers have 2-year sales cycles. Some are 2 to 3 months. But it's a lot longer than the cycle of, say, buying a pair of shoes, for example. So another really unique challenge when building a B2B CDP, you know, as the head of product, is understanding the synergy and the dynamics between the buying team. So CB's most recent finding where there's 6.8 buyers in a B2B software purchase. So each of these buyers has a different level of technical acumen, different familiarity with your product, and different pain points and priorities that they're part of. And then the last two are, the variety of tools and the variety of content and channels. So there's purpose-built B2B tools. And when building our CDP, we were really thinking about how to integrate with these tools. And then the tactics and channels and messages, how do we deal with all this content and context to get each buyer the right message at the right time? So moving on to the next slide here, we'll kick things off. Let's talk about getting a champion for your data project. So, I mentioned about 100 things in that last slide. We found it very successful when starting an organization-wide project like implementing a customer data platform to start small. Start with someone that has the unique tactical pain points, such as a team that's managing a lot of lists and a lot of data entry, a lot of repetitive tasks. It might be a team that has data blind spots. So maybe it's your VP of marketing doesn't know how their return on ad spend or some other metric. Maybe your event budget isn't matched to your actual campaigns in your CRM. These are all key projects that could start an initiative. And then sometimes, there's even an executive top-down initiative. A lot of times you'll find these as a customer experience initiative, customer journey. We're finding that CMOs are owning more and more of the customer journey, even post-sale and upsell, cross-sell. So let's talk about some KPIs. One of the things when I was a marketing technology leader, and I owned these tools and I wanted to bring in a new tool, my CFO would always ask me to defend it with a business case. So I find it's helpful when making an investment case to pick a few key KPIs to lead you into the pilot and through to determine if it's successful or failure. So I like to start with the low-hanging fruit. I haven't met a company that hasn't griped about their data, talked about things like missing data, duplication rates. Hey, sales doesn't enter their records in the system, things like this. So one of the key metrics we always benchmark when we start an engagement, whether it's a pilot or even in the evaluation phase before someone becomes a customer with Calibermind, we're always trying to benchmark their operational metrics. And then moving down this list, you can see it impacts the organization larger and larger, but it's also longer to measure. There's more moving parts, and there's more things influencing the stuff at the bottom of this grid than just the customer data platform. But getting that strong foundation is a good place to start. So moving on, I want to talk a little bit about tool proliferation on the market in the marketing and sales technology landscape. So as I mentioned, last marketing ops role I held, we had 50 or 60 tools in our stack. Even as a startup, when I joined Calibermind, implemented 10 tools in my first month. So, as a marketing technologist, what's happening is there's more and more point solutions out there that do very little things very well. And that's fantastic to solve those problems. But the challenge with growing a tool stack is iterating. So you're always testing new tools. You're expecting half of them to fail. So you're migrating off systems, on systems. It's essential to start thinking of a strategy. How can you wrangle all this data and use it to benefit your customers? So moving on to this next slide here, what I've done is graphed out. I found a great resource and blog on this. It's in the footnote there. You can see this yellow line across the middle. This is a flat line. Think of that as personalization. So the more you can see on this y-axis, as the stack is growing in complexity, you have more and more data, but relative to the size of your stack, you could actually utilize less of it. So you could think how this could actually reverse the impact of personalization, such as my CEO the other day got an email from one of our vendors that said, hey, you should really try a pilot with our product. But we're already a customer, so that's a really poor customer experience. Obviously, that one system wasn't aware of what the other system knew that said we were a customer. So moving to this next slide, you could see with a CDP, we're actually flipping these axes on their head. So as your stack is growing in complexity, you're actually benefiting from it. You're able to get more and more signals out of this data, create a standardized, clean data layer, and then use that to model personalization on top. So we really don't see people starting with and really succeeding with some of the latest AI technology out there that can do this personalization, unless they've integrated their tools and have a single source of truth for this data. So I want to talk a little bit about the data hierarchy. I mentioned it, and how we would overlay a CDP on top of it. So this is, you could think of it as a maturity model inspired by the hierarchy of needs from my psychology class back in the day. You can think about this as the first thing you mentioned, we mentioned in this presentation, as Alex mentioned, is we're acquiring all this data. So it could be visitor data, it could be someone you meet at an event, someone that a rep puts in a CRM, lists, things like that. As you're collecting this data, we work on methods to refine it and standardize it, so that we're saving everybody who accesses this data time. We're saving our data scientists time when they're modeling data. We're saving sales reps time when they're logging into the system and looking up accounts. And then we're saving marketing ops time building these campaigns. And then as we move to the top of this pyramid, Alex also touched on things like affinities and context. So depending on what you're doing, what's your exact role and interests and projects going on at your place of work, you may receive different messaging that's much more effective than, I'd say, companies that aren't quite up to the top of this pyramid yet. So I want to drill down and get technical here on this next slide. So Scott Brinker published a great article a couple months back on the different topologies of a marketing stack. So you can see on the upper right here, this is what we call a data bus architecture. So you can think of Calibermind like a single source of truth, or a bus that is moving all of your data between these systems and making sure it's all accurate. So, I mean, one of the reasons why blockchain is getting so much news coverage in the financial world is because of this same effect. You could think of it at an organization. When one person changes something in one system, all the other systems should know about it. And furthermore, if the person's making that change was the incorrect change, you need a system to correct and say that's an invalid change. So this is the concept of a CDP. So you can think of all these connected apps and accessing the same data set, and then using that data set to build very robust and actionable models, triggering actions back into the tools that you use. All right, so we've picked 3 of the most popular use cases that we're coming across. As David mentioned, CDP is kind of a new concept. I want to talk about 3 key and popular business-to-business use cases for a customer data platform. So the first one is really popular, and there's a lot of tools that do just this that are native to Salesforce. Tools like Ringlead and Lean Data, things like that. Dupe blockers. However, if you take a step back and think about doing this in between all of your systems, you can take a much more strategic approach about lead to account matching. You may have a freemium business model. You might have millions of users downloading your app. However, the target account list that sales is using and going after is always going to be different than that superset of all your user base. So it's really critical to understand when a new record comes into the system, what's your relationship with them, what's your history, are they a known entity in your CRM? And if so, does it make sense to auto-convert that person and attach it to the account in your CRM as a direct relationship, as a contact? So this is basically making all of your teams that are working on this account aware that these other people are interacting with your company. This is a key concept, lead to account matching. All right, moving on. This is kind of harkens back to the use case I mentioned when I was director of marketing ops, wrangling all those tools, email providers, things like that. So the idea is all these APIs that you're talking to these tools, there's limits on them. There's a cost for getting this data from these partners. And also there's, it's like kind of making a copy if you think about making a Xerox copy. Each copy is going to have a slightly less resolution. So one of the core use cases of a customer data platform is to take inaccessible data, bring it into one place, enrich it, standardize it, and then move it into another place. So if you could think back to that example, we had Zendesk Chat, we had 4 or 5 different data enrichment providers. FullContact is one of our preferred providers, but like Alex said, there's signals that you might wish to get from other data vendors to complement that. Maybe you're getting funding data or something else, really detailed technographic data. So the idea is, if you centralize this, you can streamline, pay less in API calls in these systems, less custom engineering requests, and then less maintenance costs, because you're not going back and forth between these systems, seeing which one is right. So moving on to this final use case, and we've been hinting at it a little bit, but this is kind of what it looks like end to end. I know ABM is a really hot topic in the B2B world today. So you could think about this as awareness of your CRM, of your web layer. So what happens when 90% of the visitors come to your site, they're not going to exactly do what you intend them to do. So they might not ask for that demo or download that free trial. So the idea is, that's a huge opportunity and shows a huge sign of intent. So when a new domain or new company visits your site, that's a good prospect. What we can do is inject data on the web layer using one of our data partners. And then that data could be injected into Google Analytics. So it's accessible to all of your web data. So you can see conversion rates by company, by industry, by employee size, things like that. And then where it gets really interesting and where a CDP gets involved is we're actually downloading the data from Google Analytics API and comparing it to the CRM as well as other data providers. So think of it this way: you have a target account comes to your website. Calibermind is aware of that, and we also have native integrations with data providers that can get net new names from that company. So if you sell to marketing departments, you could technically go and at that moment insert the entire marketing department for that organization into your CRM when that person, just by that one person visiting your website. So this is really, really exciting, especially for things like sales prospecting and ABM campaigns. Maybe you want to send that company a direct mailer or invite them to an event. You might not want to spend the money inviting them if you're not sure, if they're not already interested, they're not visiting your website. So this is a very, very cool use case for a CDP. So wrapping up my section, then I'll turn it over back to David, and we can answer some questions. So kind of in closing here, when thinking about a CDP, if you're a business-to-business organization, you definitely want to think of the reasons why you're selecting a certain CDP over another. So it could be lead to account matching. It could be analyzing these different integrations that are not B2C tools. There's a lot of various reasons, but I'm proud to say that our company Calibermind has got a leg up on this specific set of use cases. So, and then the third bullet here deals with content. So this is you might have recorded sales calls, marketing PDFs, webinars, video transcripts, things like that. There's many types of data besides just the rows and columns of data you would find on a contact list. So, APIs and different data formats can all be normalized down to a queryable data set in a customer data platform. So if you think about it, if you wanted to do a recommendation, say an automated email recommendation, you need to first know what all of the emails talk about, and then you need to know who are the people that could get these emails. So there's really two sides of the coin. It's not just the people, it's also the content and the unstructured data. And then the final thing I'll say is, with all the advents of AI out there and visualization, things like that, it's really I'd say critical to make sure that your CDP partner is aware of these technologies, even better in their platform. So things like the ability to do predictive models, automated flows and recommendations, all native in the app, is what differentiates a true CDP from, say, like something like a Zapier, or as David mentioned, just moving data between systems. There's a lot of benefits by consolidating this data and then building insights on top of it. All right, David, you want to bring us home here?
Absolutely. So we've just given you some things to look for. We've given you some use cases. Hopefully we've gotten you just super excited at the very thought of all the wonderful things that you could do with the CDP, and the only thing between you and that nirvana is the person who has to sign the purchase order. Maybe that's you, in which case you're home free, but most of us have a boss who asks pointed questions like the ones that I was talking about earlier, about what's in it for me. So how do we sell the CDP internally? There are, of course, any number of things to do, and let's put this in a little context. Sometimes it's just so obvious. Sometimes the company and the powers that be within the company say, we need personalization, we need a unified view of the customer, we need a unified customer experience. CDP is the way to do that. We're done. Just buy it. Don't bother me with the details. Just find the right one and go through this sort of list that we just talked about. Other situations, not quite so easy. I really do have to sell it. So certainly return on investment estimates. You need some sort of a business case to make. Always a challenge with marketing technology because you don't know until you do it, but there's plenty of cases around of what other people have accomplished and the kind of ROI that they got for their products. So there's certainly real data to work with to build a business case and build an ROI estimate. Another argument or tack you take is, well, everybody else is doing it, and your mom said if everybody else jumps off a bridge, don't you jump off a bridge. But when it comes to our marketing technology, we assume that the other people are a little more rational than that. So we do need to keep up with them. We need to give a good experience, and the CDP again is a way to give a competitive experience. There was an interesting study not long ago that was talking about expectations for personalization. It actually found that business buyers were more demanding than consumer buyers when it came to what they expected in terms of personalization. So we've all been trained as business people to expect really great treatment, and the CDP is an important way to keep up with the Joneses in delivering that treatment. Better measurement, clearly. Sometimes that's enough. Classic marketer problem is I just don't know what the return is on my marketing investment, not my technology investment. And the CDP, by aggregating the data and putting it all in one place, makes it accessible for analytics. And in fact, when we look at some of the things that people do with the unified customer view, that better analytics ranks right up there at the top as the number one or number two most common use for the data. So even if your marketing systems can't personalize, just being able to do the analytics and understand your marketing spend, understand what's working and what's not working is a huge advantage of something that the CDP makes vastly simpler. And then finally, specific data-dependent opportunities, things you can only do if the data is assembled and unified and persisted in the CDP database so that you can do personalization and cross-channel, omni-channel journeys and all the great things that we want to do. We can't do them if we can't get our hands on the data, and the CDP makes it vastly simpler to get our hands on data. If you look over on the right there at the tactics that B2B organizations are using, every one of those tactics is driven by data. Analytics, ABM, artificial intelligence, personas, personalization, programmatic, all that requires a great deal of quality data. Because if it's having a great deal of bad data, you have to have quality data, and that's exactly what the CDP is going to deliver to you. So one final, on the next slide, we have, the ultimate case, of course, is conversion rate. That's probably the thing that you care about almost more than anything else. And here we have a study from our friends at Calibermind who did some analysis, and they said, well, we know that Calibermind improves the conversion rate, well, and here's why. It helps us do predictive lead scoring, it helps us do segmentation, it helps us do key account targeting, it helps us do orchestration. These are all the specific applications that we can use Calibermind for, and these are how they impact, in this case, if I read the slide right, roughly a 30% improvement, 30 to 39% improvement in conversion rate based on all the good things that we can get from the Calibermind CDP, or presumably other CDP as well. So that, I believe, wraps up the official part of this, and now we get to the good part, which is where you get to ask questions. And so we will look for questions. I'm not 100% sure how the questions work. I think you can chat.
Yeah, we've got it on our end. You can chat in to put in your questions. It actually looks like we have a number of them right now, and we're about 8 minutes out, so we'll just start from the top down. But first off, I would like to thank everybody that took the time out of their busy days to join us for this webinar. Thank you, David, for kicking things off and all of the insights around CDPs. Thanks, Nic, for running through different use cases. Really appreciate it. We've been partnered with you both for a while now, but I even picked up a couple of new things throughout this. So I will jump into the questions. The first one here comes from Mike Kelly. Hope you're still on the line here. The question is, do you have any customers using FullContact data to integrate with AI chatbots? And if so, what kind of success are they having? And are aspects of FullContact they're using to enhance the chatbot experience? So we actually do. We have a number of great customers and partners that work in the chatbot world. It really got started with some of the chat platforms. We have a few partners in that space that are personalizing communications when people are chatting in to talk to a sales rep or with a service team. We want to personalize that experience. We need things like first name, last name, location. We can tie that back into a CRM to see what sort of services they're being provided with today, and also what other tickets are out there in the ecosystem. After working with a number of chat platforms, and as the market evolved, we started to see more and more partners come in that wanted to completely automate that experience. There's really no mystery behind a whole lot of those chatbot systems today that it's actually not a real person behind it, but you can start to personalize those efforts through data enrichment where it does start to feel more human. If you have personal insights that typically only a human being would be able to discern, you can start to make it a better experience. So some of our customers are using our data, specifically our Enrich API, to learn more about that person and go beyond just name personalization. Maybe they figure out what their favorite sports team is and they tie it into a conversation. Maybe the actual language that the chatbot is using is going to change based off of the demographic that they're in. You're going to talk to a millennial in a different way that you might talk to a baby boomer. So having different automated responses based off of data insights coming from FullContact's enrichment can help with an engagement through something like an AI chatbot. Happy to jump into further details with you, Mike. We'll be sending out an email with the recorded webinar, contact information for the 3 panelists, and then answers to all of the questions. Ultimately, I think we have about time for one more here. The second question on the list is, how is a CDP different from a CRM? David and Nick, I think you guys can probably fight over that one. David, did you want to try to answer that one for us?
Sure. I don't know if I want to fight about it, but CRM is an operational system. It's built for salespeople primarily, or service agents, to have conversations, take the notes, work with an individual customer, set a follow-up, just do very specific tasks. And you design a system to do that in a certain way, to work with one person at a time to pull up all the data about that person. Obviously, very important technology, not designed to deal with your customers as a group, not designed to run analytical queries, for example. You actually use a different data structure if you want to do analytical queries than if you want to pull up all the data associated with one customer. So it's just built for a fundamentally different purpose. I think we've already defined the CDP, so I won't bore you with that definition again, but it's designed to build unified customer data from all services. One of the other big distinctions between CRM, the CRM data is basically coming by someone entering it into the CRM system directly, the sales agent sitting there and typing in the screen. The CDP is not built to generate data. CDP doesn't actually generate any data. It gets data from other sources. It's built to do that. It's built to accommodate all kinds of different sources. So it's designed to be much more flexible in terms of the data that it can range. So that's just a couple of differences. And perhaps Nick has some other ones he wants to talk about.
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit it right on the head. I could cover the technology a little bit. If you think about it, a CRM is based on a relational database. So similar to a spreadsheet in Excel, you have rows and columns. And then what you do is there's IDs that join to other IDs. So you know, hey, this table matches with this table. It's this contact works for this account, etc. But a CDP, and then regarding the CRM, I've seen a lot of CRMs. Well, I'll see on average maybe somewhere between 100,000 contacts to several million email addresses in a CRM. But a CDP has different textures of data as well as much more data. So Salesforce charges you, for example, if you say you're using Salesforce as your CRM, they'll charge you for every task that you're storing in the CRM. However, you might not want to store every page visit, every click in your app, every data point you've gotten from every vendor. So, CDPs allow you to store this semi-structured data in a format called JSON to allow us to receive raw data from these different data sources and APIs. So, whereas a CRM, if you're using data enrichment in your CRM, you actually need to create a new column or custom field for each single attribute. If you have 4 different data providers giving you industry, then you would need 4 different fields in the CRM called industry A, industry B, industry C. But a CDP gets all of this raw data and then maps it to one single industry field in that same example in your CRM. So it can help you streamline the data bloat that's in your CRM and improve performance and storage costs.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. So it looks like we're about on time here. Thanks again to everyone for dedicating an hour of your day to our webinar. As I'd mentioned, we'll be sending out an email with the link, contact information, and the questions that we unfortunately couldn't get to today. Specifically, Mark, Asim, and Einon, we will respond to your questions and put them in the thread so everyone else can hear about what you guys were looking into. Thanks again, everyone. We'll catch you next time.